Welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about what everyone gets wrong about therapy. We're going to talk about some common misconceptions, go over some myths, and generally what therapy is to different people, why some go, why some don't go. So, I want to start off by posing this question for you. What is therapy? What does it mean? I'm sure you've heard about it before. What does it mean? Now you're sitting there and going, well, Daniel, that's a simple question. Therapy means it's a thing where you go and talk to someone and you feel better. Well, okay. How is therapy any different than talking to a friend? How is it any different than talking to your romantic partner when you tell them about a long day of work? Is that therapy? How do you differentiate the two? Are there different levels of therapy? And you might sit there and you go, well, Daniel, if I'm going to therapy, the distress that I'm feeling from my problems and the consequences that I have are going to exceed my resources available. So if my resources are my best friend, and I'm telling him about all the things I'm experiencing, maybe the anxiety is so bad that I start calling in sick to work because I feel physically sick. But I know I don't have the flu, I know I don't have COVID. When I think about work, I feel nauseous, I feel lightheaded, I think I'm gonna faint, and I call in sick to work. So it's negatively impacting my life. I don't want to hang out with my friends. And it's getting to a point where my friends don't know what to tell me. They don't know what advice to give me. Right? So you sit there and you go, well, fair enough. Right? You've got certain problems. Your friends don't know what advice to give you. And you go, let me talk to a professional about this. That's a fair way to look at it. Another thing that I'd add is it's important to recognize that in a friendship, it goes two ways, communication. You share something, I share something. I share something, you share something. If you go to a therapist and you start opening up about your childhood, and Dr. So-and-so starts saying, you think you had it bad, wait till you hear this. Once my best friend's cousin. Folks, that's inappropriate, right? So we recognize when we go to a therapist, it's one way. One person leads the conversation, they get to decide what we talk about, and the therapist is going to be careful and conscious about how much they disclose, how much they share about themselves. So what is therapy, man? You go talk to somebody and it makes you feel better? Why? Why not just talk to your friends and family? Well, as we came to it earlier, maybe they don't have the correct advice, the correct knowledge to help you out and to give you guidance in whatever problem that you're dealing with. Awesome. So let's say you show up to therapy and you're saying, all right, I listened to Daniel teaches. There's going to be this old white dude, maybe with a beard. He's going to have glasses on. I'm going to lie down on the couch, look up at the ceiling. He's going to ask me a bunch of weird questions, and he's going to tell me it goes back to my childhood, and then he's going to give me advice. Word for word, he's going to tell me I have to do this, and this, and this. Rock on. So guess what happens? You go to therapy. You say, hello, so-and-so. Oh, you just look like the professionals that I've seen in the movies and like Ted Lasso and those other TV shows. You sit down and you go, all right, Dr. So-and-so, this is my problem. Me and my girlfriend aren't getting along well. Or at work, my supervisor keeps getting under my nerves and I'm losing my mind. Or I've had anxiety for a long time. I thought it was normal, but I keep calling in sick to work. That's a problem. What should I do? Tell me, what do I need to do to better my life? Give me the secrets. Give me this profound knowledge that will change the way that I interact in my life. And guess what the therapist does? Not all, but the majority of them will look at you and go, well, what do you think you should do? Or, okay, so you got anxiety. What about that specifically bothers you? Or, tell me more about that. And they'll do a lot of, and they'll do a lot of head nodding. And one of the more frustrating things can be if you're looking for answers and if you're looking for concrete advice, and your friends are going to give you advice like this, like this, like this. Hey man, I feel terrible because Susie left me. Go at the gym. I'm not getting along with my coworkers and it's really bothering me. Just quit. So then you go to someone who's supposedly the expert, who's going to give you this profound advice about life and how to interact and how to go about it. And all this schmuck does is go, And he nods his head up and down and he says, well, what do you think you should do about it? How can you change your behavior so that it'll change the way you feel? And you're sitting there going, well, dude, if I had the answers, I wouldn't come and see you, right? There's a reason that I'm here. Like, imagine if you went to a mechanic, right? And you show up and you're like, look, my car's not working. I can't get it to start up. And then the mechanic goes, well, what makes you think it doesn't work? And you go, I press the button or I put the key in and it doesn't turn on. He goes, well, what do you think we should do? What do you think, what kind of behavior do you think you could do that could help fix your car? Like, this is baffling, right? In no other field, or rarely, if any other field, do we have the same approach. So for anyone who says, look, therapy's useless, it's frustrating, it's a ripoff, it's a scam, they want your money, I definitely understand where those sentiments come from. Absolutely. Now, it's important to recognize that when you go to a therapist, there's a bunch of different theoretical orientations, theoretical models. That's a fancy way of saying there's a bunch of different approaches to therapy, and each therapist is going to differ. If, my friends, you have a little bit of knowledge, you know how different psychoanalysis is from person-centered therapy, and how different those are from existential therapy, how different that is from postmodernism and some of the things they're doing. So you can see the different emphasis in those therapies, and some of them are more direct. Some of them are more, I'm going to tell you what you should do. And some of them are, look, you're the captain of your ship. I'm merely just another passenger on board, right? And I'm not this person who's going to tell you what to do. So it's important to recognize there's different fits for different people. So immediately, if you're saying, Daniel, thank you so much for pointing this out. This is why I haven't gone to therapy. This is why I'll never go to therapy. Hold on. Let's break this down together. Because this video is for you. Anybody would tell you, and the literature is very, very clear about this right now, the number one thing, if not the number one thing, and this is evidence-based, that supports the progress, the improvement, the recovery of a client and whatever obstacle they're facing, guess what it is? Is it a certain theoretical model? Does it have to do with their age, their sex? One of the number one things that's important in the therapeutic relationship is that the relationship between the client and the therapist. If you walk in and you believe your therapist is kind, you believe they want to help you, right? So they actually care about you. You're not just another number for them. You believe they are capable of helping you. It's not just that they want to help you, but they know how to. You believe they have the expertise to help you, and you feel comfortable opening up and talking to them. The chances that your situation is going to improve are quite high. Now, I can't give you the exact numbers, but if you Google this, hopefully you can find the article. Obviously, the unfortunate thing is, folks, those peer-reviewed articles are behind a paywall, but I'm pretty confident in saying that you can find bloggers who have read that article and who've kind of summarized it. So hopefully, I don't want you to pay for anything. But essentially, they've said, look, the relationship is extremely important. Thank you, Carl Rogers, right? The importance of connecting with a therapist. And if you're someone who's going, look, forget all that talking nonsense. I just want you to tell me what I should do. I've got no idea. Whereas other people might say, look, I just want you to hear me out a little bit. So these are important things to recognize. Look, on the other aspect of it, it's important to talk about this. Some people have this exact idea that I just talked about. Oh, therapy is I go, I yap away for 50 minutes. The therapist goes, ooh, and ah. And then he says, thanks, that'll be $200. Your insurance will pay maybe 50% of it. That'll be $100 out of pocket. For what? And I don't feel any better. I would like to share with you something that my clinical psychologist professor shared with us. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Shouts out to you. Dr. Robinson goes, and I'm paraphrasing, she goes, look, if I get a client and they sit down and they go, I feel terrible. I feel depressed. I feel anxious. I would like to not feel these things. That's why I'm in therapy. With her response, and I quote, was, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. But what we can do is we can look at your thoughts. We can address your behaviors and your habits, and in turn, they will influence how you feel. Now, if I'm paraphrasing here and you show up and you say, Daniel, I feel terrible, look, I can't wave a magical wand and make you feel good. And I want to change this kind of expectation of therapy. What is therapy? I feel depressed, so I go to therapy so I'm no longer depressed. What does that mean? That means if you go to therapy, and if by 2 or 3 sessions you're still depressed, well, I guess therapy didn't work. Imagine if you went to the gym, and you said, after 3 sessions of the gym doing a couple of bicep curls, I'm going to look like The Rock. After 3 sessions, and if it doesn't work, I guess working out doesn't work. I guess it's a ripoff. That's just what the Matrix wants you to do, to keep you busy. Right? But what we recognize with working out is it takes time. To be very, very, very generous weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks before you start seeing at least a little bit of changes if you're doing cardio for your heart, for your lungs, for your stamina. But if you really want to bulk up and get big, folks, anybody will tell you it takes months. Months. And that's if you're good and you're consistent and you're focused on your food, not to mention you sleep well so you can recover better. But yet for therapy, people will go to 2 or 3 sessions, their depression doesn't get better, and they go, well, I guess it doesn't work. What is therapy to you? What is it supposed to do? It's supposed to cure my depression. Really? Folks, I said this stat in my video about depression. If you're interested, check it out. It was this idea where if an individual between the ages of 12 to 17 experiences a depressive episode, that means if they get diagnosed with, let's say, major depressive disorder, okay, and they're experiencing a boatload of their symptoms, the chances, and then let's say they go to therapy, they recover, all right, they get a lot better. The chances of that individual having those depressive symptoms again in the next 5 years is 70%. What does this mean? For the majority of people, and I know I'm generalizing here, we got to be careful when we say always, never, majority, minority, but for a lot of people, folks, things like depression, things like social anxiety, these are lifelong things. It's not like you're going to go, it's cured, and then you're never going to have it again. And before people start getting really pessimistic and discouraged and upset, it's important to recognize that when we go in with this expectation of, I'm going to therapy to not feel depressed again, we're setting ourselves up for failure, in my opinion. A more appropriate way to approach it, if you're asking me, is I'm going to therapy to learn how to better cope with my depressive feelings. I'm going to therapy to learn how to manage stress so that when I go to work and when I inevitably feel stressed, instead of saying, F this, I'm out, I can take a breath and I can begin to love the storm. The same storm and the same rocky waters that terrifies me and paralyzes me, I recognize it'll be stormy in the future. I want to be stronger and more capable of adapting to it. I want to be the guy in a room where when something goes wrong, people can depend on me. And I know that won't just disappear, that feeling of stress, that feeling of anxiety, and that's unrealistic. What I really want is to learn how to manage it. How can I cope with it? How can I get better at using it to enhance my life? How can I look at stress as something that is helpful instead of a hindrance, instead of something that makes my life worse? When we have this sort of a mindset, it is far more realistic, it is far more beneficial, it is far more empowering, rather than going in there and, again, quoting Dr. Robinson, having a dead person's goal. You know, you show up to therapy, you shake so-and-so's hand, hi, why are you here? So, here's why I'm here. I don't want to be anxious anymore. I don't want to feel anxious anymore. What I'm hearing you say is you don't want to be a human anymore. Because to be human means to be anxious. To be human means to have moments of happiness and joy, and means to have moments of heartbreak. And if you're an individual who never feels anxious, ever, that would be quite strange. Like, I would be a little worried because anxiety helps save our lives in many ways. If you're walking along a cliff, the feeling of anxiousness, the cortisol, the nervous system, fight or flight, gets you a little sharper. Right? Well, what happens, fight or flight, if I'm simplifying, your heart rate speeds up. What does that mean? Your blood is pumping throughout your system at a faster rate. What does blood carry? Blood carries oxygen, meaning you're getting an excessive amount of oxygen to all your organs, your heart, your lungs, your muscles. You're a little faster, you're a little quicker, you're a little sharper. The problem is when this is chronic, that's when it's detrimental. Detrimental is a fancy word of saying harmful. But a little bit, acute, being in fight or flight is extremely important. If it's a self-defense scenario, if you're walking along a cliff, a little bit of stress is good for a test because it makes you focus. It makes sure you don't get sleepy. It makes sure you don't get just hungry all of a sudden or you have to go to the bathroom. So we recognize that when someone goes to therapy, and first of all, they have a dead person goal. I don't want to feel anxious anymore, right? Which is like, you're not a human being, right? That we don't operate, we don't live like that. It's kind of like saying, I remember on podcasts, I used to hear things like, men are logical, women are emotional. I'm not sure what that means. Look, if we were to look at the brain, and as you're conversing in dialogue, certain areas of your brain are going to light up, okay? And when you start looking at the prefrontal cortex, which is just the front of your head, just where your forehead is, and then you look at the amygdala, the part of emotion which lights up. Folks, being emotional is not something that we can choose to do, right? We can't choose to just feel really sad or feel really happy. Now, I've made videos about this in the past where there's some indirect things you could do. You can engage in certain behavior that might release certain dopamine or certain hormones that could make you feel a certain way indirectly. You could change your thoughts, and thus your thoughts would have an impact on your feelings. And really the big one is, if you do feel really upset or really angry, you have a little bit of leverage in how that anger or how that sadness manifests itself. Some people get mad, they start yelling. When others get mad, they get quiet. And they say, my heart rate's increasing, I'm getting tense. Let me take a couple of deep breaths. I want to slow down. I'm not going to talk to anybody right now. So it's important to recognize that things like anxiety, things like depression, sadness, anger, excitement, frustration, noise, these are a part of our everyday lives. And to say we want to go to therapy because we want to get rid of them, in my opinion, is not a realistic goal. What we should try to do is we should go there in the sense of we want to cope with it. We want to manage with it. We want to get better at adapting with it. So that when it happens again in the future, we are better equipped to deal with it. Going back to this idea of, what everybody gets wrong about therapy is, and look, it's hard to give a black and white answer. Because a lot of therapists will do that. They will say yup and the and all that stuff, and they'll be really cautious about giving advice. But I also really want to specify this. If you think all therapy is you go to someone and you just complain all the time, that's actually not a good thing. Here's why. So one of the things, if we look at the big five personality model, OCEAN, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, we notice that on average, women are higher in neuroticism than men are, right? What does that mean? That means experiencing negative emotions. For example, we know that the rate of depressive symptoms in women is higher than men, same with anxiety symptoms. One of the worst things, one of the very, very bad habits that an individual could do is to complain all the time about their problems. Now you're sitting there, you're going, Daniel, that doesn't make any sense. Everyone's been telling me if I talk about my problems, it'll make me feel better. Be careful. There's some ambiguity there. What does talking about your problems mean? So there's some research that suggests that if what they would call this rumination, or dwelling on your problems, which is a fancy word for, look, my life sucks, school sucks, work sucks, I suck. And if you're always thinking that, and if you're always talking about that, it increases your chance of having depressive symptoms. Because if I think that everything sucks, how motivated am I to hit the gym? How motivated am I to eat clean, to sleep well? And then when I don't do those things, it's just a vicious cycle. And one thing that's very interesting was that girls will often co-ruminate, which increases both their chances of depression. So Sally looks at Brittany, and Sally says, my life really sucks because I thought John was interested in me, but then he hooked up with my friend, and then I forgot the other lady's name that I just made up. And then girl number 2 says, oh, you think your life sucks? I went to work the other day, my supervisor did this, and then I did all the work, and then my coworker took all the credit. Oh, well, last week, blah, blah, blah. That actually increases depressive symptoms. That is not a good thing to do. So now you're sitting there going, wait a minute, Daniel, you say go to therapy, but then you say talking about our problems doesn't make it better. It increases depressive symptoms. So Andrew Tate was right. Hold on, my friends. Hold on. We're almost there. This is the last thought. It's important that we recognize what talking about our problems actually means. So if we sit there and we just complain, and we say, I feel terrible, life sucks, I suck, you suck, I don't see any point in doing any of this stuff, it can get worse. What'll actually happen in therapy is there'll be an element of that. Absolutely. Look, this is terrible, that's terrible, this is terrible. But you're always going to come out of it. The ending of it, it's not going to, like, the paragraph should never end with, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. And the therapist goes, yeah, that really sucks. Then you go, yep, absolutely. All right, I'll see you next week. Why? Why? What does that do for anybody? Look, a little bit of ranting every once in a while is normal. But if it's all the time, it's not a good thing. So it should always end with something like, okay, I hear what you're saying is you're really frustrated because you and your wife keep talking over each other and no one's listening. And then they go, yeah, and it pisses me off. And then maybe you go, what can you do, or what can we do to help you practice so that when you go home with your wife, the same thing doesn't happen? And then maybe the person goes, well, look, here's a couple of things I had in mind and I wanted to run them by you, Mr. Therapist. Or the person goes, look, I have no idea. I want you to tell me. And the therapist could go, okay, well, I've had many clients who've presented a similar problem. Here's a couple of things that we've done pragmatically that have gone to successful results. So one thing we could do is we could role play, right? I'll play the role of your partner, you be yourself, and we'll go over this together. A second thing we could do is we could talk about why you haven't confronted her about this. What does this go back to? Are you just worried about being too polite? Do you see it as rude? Maybe growing up, nobody in your family confronted anybody about anything, so you don't know how to do it? We can practice confronting. So we begin to recognize that if we go to therapy and we're just complaining from morning till night, that's not a good thing. There is an element of complaining, without a doubt. But it always leads to, okay, I hear what you're saying. Now, based on this, what can you do about it? What kind of behavior can you change? How can we address that? How can we practice this? Look, I've got a couple of things in mind. Which of these is most congruent with you? Which of these is going to work best with you? So we recognize, look, therapy isn't just I go there and I rant and I complain to somebody for an hour and then I leave and it doesn't make me feel any better. Because you're right. It might not. But we can also recognize that complaining should be one. If you have a pie, if you have a pizza, complaining is one slice, right? And the rest of it are, well, let's talk about why you complain. Let's talk about why this bothers you. Okay, understood. What has to happen so that this doesn't bother you anymore? Well, my wife has to stop doing this. Okay, so what I'm hearing is we have to change your wife's behavior. So maybe we can bring her into therapy. Or, which usually that's a very tough one. Or, what can we change on your part? Can we make this not bother you anymore somehow? Can you talk to her about this? Have you tried talking to her about this? So you're going to go through plan A, B, C, D to deal with the thing that is bothering you. Because if we were just going to sit there and talk about the problem with no solution in sight, I would not recommend it. Mind you, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor. I'm a psychology student who brings you kind of his views and his perspectives. And I hope that this video here today kind of change the way that you look at therapy as I'm going there to fix something in 2 sessions versus I'm going there to learn how to cope or how to manage something. And recognizing for those people thinking, oh, I'm just spending money so somebody can listen to me. Why don't I just hire a prostitute and talk to her for an hour? It's not like that. I mean, it could be depending on your therapist, but highly, highly, highly likely it's not like that because the literature does show there's no benefit in just complaining for an hour with no solutions at the end. So, with that very positive, optimistic ending, I thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this one, folks. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and make sure you're getting enough sleep nowadays. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.